It is rolling, so.
Dope. That is not fair.
Here, I'll shrink down just a little bit.
No.
Yeah, here, how's this?
That's too much.
No, this is perfect. This is perfect. I like this. Being this tall is great.
I'm sure you do. Here, take this. This is more realistic.
Welcome to the second installment of Enough to Be Dangerous. I'm Nick Mayo.
And I'm Caleb Weidman.
And today's episode is going to be about white balance and understanding how to adapt to any type of lighting scenario you find.
We're going to be covering the color of light, the intensity of light, and the shape of light. Let's go. Welcome to Blackbar.
That was
super cheesy. Let's never don't do that again. We're never going to do that again.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Hi, I'm Caleb, and first we're going to talk about the color of light. It comes as a surprise to, I would assume, no one that light does come in different colors. In the photography world, we measure the color of light along two different axes, temperature and tint. The temperature of light tells us how warm or cool a light is, how much it leans towards orange or blue. The tint of light tells us if it leans towards magenta or green. Just about every type of light that you might encounter will fall somewhere on the spectrum. Incandescent lights are a bit warmer. Fluorescent lights are a bit greener. Daylight is blue. And in general, I found LEDs are magenta. So you're obviously aware that different colors of light exist, but you're probably not thinking about that throughout the day.
You can tell with this orange light that it's casting an orange look on me. Not necessarily my background, but mostly on myself. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm not Caleb. Can you tilt down the camera a little bit? Okay, I'm just not that tall. Anyway, you can see that there's a lot of orange light on myself right now. In fact, I have a white mug here where you can really see the orange cast on this mug, but how did I know this is white? If this mug is getting a bunch of orange light on this, on the cup here, shouldn't I interpret this as orange? I mean, if all lights have different colors, doesn't that mean anything that would be white would absorb that color and ultimately look that color of light? Well, no, because our brains are actually really clever and can understand and recalibrate what white is underneath any type of light source. This is actually a process called chromic adaptation, and it's really cool. You should look it up. Our minds are really good at this, but our cameras, not so much.
Eyes up here, Nick. Now, that isn't to say that modern cameras haven't made an attempt at trying to fix this issue in the past. Nearly every modern camera you can buy these days has an auto white balance feature where it scans your scene and tries its best to detect what white actually is. For the most part, as long as you're using all the same color lights, it doesn't do a bad job in most scenarios. The issue comes when we start using lights of mixed color temperatures. Mixed lighting is the bane of any auto white balancing feature. Our normal set here is actually mixed lighting. We have cool lights in front of us and warm lights behind. Without giving more direction to our camera, it's very likely that it would actually be switching back and forth between color temperatures, switching to adjust for the cool on my face and the warm behind me on a second-by-second basis. In order to avoid this problem, we need to set our white balance manually instead of hoping our camera will guess it automatically. Most cameras will have a set of presets that you can pick between when trying to set your white balance. Daylight setting, fluorescent setting, incandescent, and a bunch more. But what about when none of the presets you're trying to use line up with the environment you're shooting?
Okay, cut. We're actually going to show you right now how we would find the white balance using our camera here. You may have a similar setting on your cameras at home. First, I'm going to go to our white balance settings and find our custom settings. After selecting that, I'm going to have Caleb hold up a white card for us so we can find something that is white. Following the directions the camera is giving me. Now we've told the camera what white is in this scene, and so it should be calibrated, and hence the whole scene should now be balanced.
Makeup!
Caleb, we're the only ones here. Who's gonna be doing makeup for you?
I'm taking a break.
Oh,
Now that we've talked about the color of light, we need to talk about the intensity of light. If you haven't seen the previous video on how to manually control the exposure of your shots, consider that a prerequisite for the rest of this video. Understanding how to control every aspect of the camera in the exposure triangle and getting good exposure is integral to getting quality stills out of any camera. But what about environments when your camera is pushed to its absolute limits? Let's say, for example, you're outside shooting an event. It is the sunniest day you have ever seen and you're trying to stop down your aperture to get a nice shallow depth of field. The problem is every time you stop down, you're adding more light to the scene, almost certainly overexposing your pictures. This is when a photographer will use a tool called a neutral density filter, or an ND filter for short. An ND filter is simply a dark colored piece of glass that darkens the scene that your camera sees. They come in a variety of different densities, and some of them are even adjustable, allowing you to change how much darker you want your camera to see. One thing to note is you need to get an ND filter that matches the diameter of the front of your lens. Just about every lens you can buy will actually have the diameter of the lens written on the side, apparently except for this one, and we didn't notice until right now. You just screw on the ND filter to the front, and you should be set to go. But what about when you're dealing with a lack of light instead of an abundance of it?
Or you could have what we have here, a low light scenario. Clearly there's not a lot of light in this room right now. There's two things that you could do to fix this. Like we explained in our last video, you can use your ISO to bump up your exposure, but the problem with that is you're going to have a lot of noise introduced into your image. You can purchase Neat Image and clean up some of those photos when you're fixing them in post, but now you're adding more work to your workload. The alternative is using a camera flash, but that comes with a lot of problems on its own. Caleb, would you mind taking a picture of me real quick with the flash on? Oh. Aside from blinding your subjects, you're going to find it creates a couple problems. Usually the lights are very small, which makes a very hard shadow, which can accentuate a lot of features on the face, like wrinkles. The light can also create a very flat image. All the light's coming from essentially in the same line as a camera, so there's no dimension to what you're filming. And generally speaking, the image is going to look unflattering. As you can see in this photo, it's certainly not the best one I've ever taken. And lastly, and probably honestly the most important thing, it's distracting. I can't imagine what I would be doing if I was using an on-camera flash during one of our Sunday services. I take so many photos that this flash would be going off every few seconds, and every time it would go off, it would be blinding the eyes of the people around me. Clearly, it's probably not the best option during a sermon. But what happens if you do have to use a flash?
If you absolutely have to use a flash, however, there are some things you can do to mitigate some of the problems you deal with when using one. The first thing you can do is get one of these external flashes and move them out from on top of your camera. Using an external flash will allow you to move it to a different part of your scene while you stay put. This will allow you to get lighting that looks more natural and avoids the flat lighting, as well as the common red eye effect that you get with top-mounted camera flashes. In addition, you can grab a flash diffuser or reflector. Like this. This small piece of cheap looking cardboard actually does a lot to enlarge the light that our flash creates. A larger light always creates a softer shadow. It will soften the light that your subject receives. If you want to go more into detail on how the physics of this actually work, we have a video right up here where you can check and see how a larger light creates softer shadows. However, if you want to get the diffusion and the directionality that you can get by an external flash, it is possible to use this on top of your camera, and instead of pointing it straight at your subject, bounce it towards a wall or a large flat surface near your subject. By aiming the light at the wall instead of your subject, you're going to make your light much larger, making your shadows significantly softer. In addition, it gives you the directional control, avoiding things like red eye and the flat lighting that comes with on-camera flashes. This is easily the best way to make a flash feel like part of your scene and not an interruption of it.
Clearly, there are some problems that you can face with using a flash, and if you know how to use a flash right, it can actually be to your benefit. But the problems that we're trying to avoid with an on-camera flash are actually things that you'd want to avoid with lighting in general. That being hard light, flat light, and unflattering light. Right now we're outside and we're going to show you what hard light looks like. In fact, you're probably seeing it right now. The sun's over there in the sky, and the sun, though a very large, massive ball of gas, relatively speaking, in our perspective, is very, very tiny in the sky. And small lights cast very sharp shadows, which you can see on my face right now. But we also have a diffuser, and if we put the diffuser up, making the light much larger in relative distance to me, now my shadows are a lot softer. So again, you want to avoid small lights that cast hard shadows. Now, this isn't just an outside problem, it's an inside problem too, especially if you're using a spotlight on your stage.
So we've talked about hard lighting, but what about flat lighting? Flat lighting occurs when it looks like your subject is being lit by all directions at the same time. It often looks very one-dimensional, boring, and it can be pretty unflattering. Not to mention, if your subject is wearing glasses, you'll often get a big glare in them and you can't see their eyes. Now, there's a time and a place for flat lighting, but most of the time it's something we want to avoid. Fortunately, there's a really quick, easy way to avoid this problem. The lighting will always look flat if you shoot with the light to your back. Shooting portraits outside with the sun behind you, flat lighting. Shooting your center stage pastor while in the front row of your sanctuary, probably flat lighting. The good thing is this is pretty fixable. Just move. Shooting with the light slightly to the left or to the right of your subject can be a big help. Even perpendicular to the camera adds a lot of drama. Even putting the light behind me can be more interesting than the light directly in front of me. The contrast that the light and shadow add to a photo will give your photo way more dimension, given, of course, that the light is actually flattering to them.
The last thing you want to avoid is unflattering light. And you're probably looking at your screen right now saying, wow, Nick, you look terrible. And you'd be right. But not because I look terrible, but because the lighting is bad. Right now, we have a light directly over my head, which is casting shadows from my eyebrow, which is essentially making me look really, really tired. Another type of lighting you want to avoid is very similar to lighting from overhead, but different. It's lighting from underneath. Essentially, it makes you look like a villain or someone incredibly scary, something that might look like this. And hopefully you feel now that you have a better understanding of how to handle any type of lighting scenario.
Make sure to stay tuned for upcoming episodes of Enough to Be Dangerous, where we cover things like composition and what you should be shooting in the first place.
And with that, thanks for watching. Dude, I thought we weren't gonna do that.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Blackbar. If you want to dive deeper into anything we talk about in these videos, make sure to check out the Blackbar podcast, where we go over our experiences in handling these issues.
You can also join us on our Discord channel. The link is in the description below. We're over there, and so are our certified pros. We're always around helping people and answering questions you might have.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.